You are now entering the horror section.
Hello and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay, joined as always with John, Kellen, and TJ. And we're also joined today by local film producer Travis Ayers. Travis, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. You've worked on a few films, including Sis, which had our pal George Hardy in it, which we all loved. You also produced The Christmas Tapes and Infrared, both starring Greg Sestero, who's best known for playing Mark in The Room. Yes, that movie, fantastic. So before we get into the movie that you selected for this week, why don't you tell us how you got involved with producing films and how you got hooked up with Greg?
Yeah, so kind of got my start. Went to film school 2009, 2010-ish. Went to George Romero's School of Filmmaking in Pittsburgh, actually a little bit of south of Pittsburgh. Really fascinating school. It's split into two. Now I think it's several programs, but then it was split into two programs. One was the George Romero filmmaking program, and then the other side was the Tom Savini special effects program. So I kind of got to, even though I was in the film program, I would also get to experience, a little bit of the special effects program, which was always exciting, so would be, it was basically, a horror fan's dream. You're getting to be around Tom Savini, you're getting to be around George Romero. Bill Heinzman, the zombie number one from Night of the Living Dead, was my film history teacher for the first semester. Robert Tennell, who is, he's my mentor. He was the producer on Surf Nazis Must Die. I was just telling my wife this. We had like a resume building class in film school, which at the time was just kind of like this, not really a class we necessarily needed. And this guy that we all kind of like, I don't know, it was just one of those situations where it wasn't a class we felt like we needed. The teacher was just very like normal, basic guy that, we kind of picked on or whatever. And come to find out, we all really clicked with him by the end of the year. And he ends up revealing that now I'm just drawing a blank. Maybe you guys can help me. Director of Blood Feast, 2000 Maniacs.
Herschel Gordon Lewis.
Yes, I literally drew a blank. So his great uncle, is Herschel Gordon Lewis.
Oh, wow.
So like
Nice.
it just like the horror lineage at this film school was like ran deep. And literally he told us, because the second we found out, we went around and like told all the teachers, and we're like, did you know that Sam Stein's great uncle is Herschel Gordon Lewis? And I guess the only reason he didn't tell anyone was like, he didn't want to bring that kind of attention to himself. So it was just really cool just to be around all this. And it was a lot of just like, as opposed to like reading about how to make films and like books and like studying theory, it was nonstop like on-set productions, whether like Fangoria would come in town and we'd do like a web series short, or a local ghost show would be filming in town and we'd go on set for that. Like it would always be hands-on stuff, which I always loved. So yeah, 2-year program, graduated there, moved to Pittsburgh, and from there I became an events coordinator, public relations manager, marketing, like kind of like a ball of different kind of job categories at a independent theater in Pittsburgh, similar to the Belcourt here in Nashville. And I was kind of in charge of like booking different movies. And then one of the things that I kind of added to some of the screenings that I would book is, and this is way before Cameo, is I would reach out to various directors or actors, agents, or their publicists, and get virtual introductions from them to play before the screenings. So like just to add like this extra flair, maybe sell some extra tickets, get people interested. And like one of the first ones that I got was it was like a tribute to Divine. And I reached out to John Waters, built really good reputation and friendship with his publicist, and got this really cool introduction from him. And then it kind of just like went from there. And like probably within like the last couple of months being at this theater, one movie that we always showed, midnight movie, that two, actually there's two midnight movies we'd always show that did really well. The first one's Troll 2. So Troll 2 comes along and I'm like, man, wouldn't it be so cool? Like, you know, I loved Best Worst Movie when it came out. It was like one of my favorite documentaries. You know, we watched it all the time in film school. It was just like the holy grail of documentaries. I was like, I got to get the dad from Troll 2. You know, I've been friends with him on Facebook for I don't know how long. What's it going to hurt to ask him? Just send him a message and say, like, you know, just ask him for an introduction. So reach out to him and, you know, give him my normal spiel. He gets back to me this long-winded message. You know, it's just the nicest message you could ever imagine. It takes him, you know, he's like, do you have a deadline? And I told him, I was like, yeah, it's like in a couple weeks. He sends me 4 different videos. He's like, pick one or show them all. I think we ended up showing all 4 of them back to back because he filmed them all in different locations, which was, if you know, obviously you guys know George, so you know his personality and just how just outgoing and just his personality. He's a very unique and fun-loving individual. So yeah, he did several different ones, and I don't know. At that time I knew I wanted out of the kind of like the art house type world. And I asked him, I was like, hey, like, are you, you know, do you need like someone like a publicist or someone like that? Like, because when I reached out to him, you know, there's no contact info for him on IMDb or anything. And just kind of like most of my career is just based on like asking people stuff. And sure enough, like he was just finishing a movie called Texas Cotton. And that, you know, led me to meeting the director of that, Tyler Russell, who I did Sist with. So, you know, it just led to that whole kind of like group that I work with. And then literally a few months after that, almost exact same circumstance, we were showing The Room. And I was like, well, you know, I was more interested in getting Greg to do an introduction versus Tommy. I just kind of like wanted that dynamic. And I knew Greg also had Best Friends Volume 1, I think. I think it was Volume 1 that was out at the time. And I was like, you know, I feel like he's going to be the better get. And same thing, you know, hey, can you do an intro? And he's like, yeah. He's like, you know, would you guys be interested in showing Best Friends? And I was like, of course, yeah, we're looking for new programming. That would be fantastic. And then, of course, we have a great screening, good friendship. And then I was like, hey, like, you know, I know a lot of contacts as far as like independent theaters. You know, do you want me to start like reaching out and seeing if I can get, you know, a couple more bookings, especially like in the Ohio area? And it just kind of like blossomed from there. You know, I was just kind of like booking theaters for them, and from there it just became a producer with Cicero Pictures. So I mean, it's me and him. It's not like this big thing. It's literally us. And then that led us down the other road where I started working. There's a school out in California in Sacramento called Futures Explored, which is a film school for adults with disabilities. And that's where I met Rob Livings and Randy Nunlau, who are the co-directors of Infrared and Christmas Tapes. And they had actually reached out to do a Zoom Q&A with Greg and George and me. And then, you know, I met them. I ended up becoming a teacher there. And it was another relationship that was built. And then I ended up doing 2 movies with them. So it's literally just kind of like how, I mean, really any industry works, but especially the film industry. It's like you meet one person and then you just start meeting other people. And, you know, basically any movie that's out right now that I'm going to pitch or whatever at the end of this podcast, it's all because of this cool little kind of like ladder that I, you know, met all these really awesome people along the way. And it was literally just asking people and just, you know, being nice. that's kind
awesome.
of my motto. That's my motto.
That's all it takes. That's all it takes too. Like I've booked shows in Nashville for like the last 10 plus years. And, you know, I've reached out to some bigger acts and even with this podcast, the worst thing they can tell you is, no, or fuck off, or just ignore you. That's the worst that can happen in these situations. It's not like you're going to sever a relationship or anything. So that's my mindset when we get guests on here. It's like, why not try and ask? Like, ask them. Why not? And we've gotten some great guests that way, So it's good to know. I didn't know you worked for Greg directly until you sent me your email address. Like, we've been friends on social media for a bit and talked back and forth because I've enjoyed the films that you've produced that I've seen so far. So that was interesting to know. I'm glad that worked out for you. So we asked you to select a few films for us to choose from. We narrowed it down. We actually spun a wheel. It was a little torn. So I have an app where it's just a wheel. We spun it, and I swear I only spun it once, and it landed on 1984 crime exploitation film Angel. So it does have some horror elements in it, and they did it on The Last Drive-In, so it counts. So let's go ahead and dive into that one.
Yeah. So, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to really quickly say, when I was coming into this, I was worried that like someone was going to ask me like, can you explain the genre of this film? And you nailed it perfectly. Like, crime exploitation is like the best like genre. Like, because I'm like, well, it has elements of comedy. Like, there's definitely crime. There's drama. There's a like kind of love, romance. There's definitely horror. So yeah, crime exploitation is, I mean, I think those are the best like descriptors of this film.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, this movie is very interesting. It's definitely the epitome of an exploitation film. I know that Joe Bob had showed it on the Last Drive-In, and it was a pick from David Gordon Green, the guy who did the Halloween trilogy everyone knows. And it's an interesting movie. It's very representative of that time period. Watching it, I had seen it once before. It had been a long time, but it kind of just brings up a lot of memories of a lot of those type of movies that I enjoy. Like, especially when you're looking at, New York, Los Angeles, which is, in the 70s and the 80s, especially the early 80s. It's such an odd time period because it was so grimy, it was so dirty, there were so many bad, sleazy things going on. And on the other side of that, in the early to mid 80s, you had basically society and Hollywood putting out all these like happy-go-lucky, like, Middle America, John Hughes, Shermer, Illinois, Back to the Future, like all these like shiny, happy things. Even when they do horror and sci-fi, right? A lot of mainstream would kind of stray away from exploitation, especially in the 80s. And the filmmakers who really did exploitation, I mean, they did it well. And I've always found that interesting because it's followed us throughout time. In the 70s, you had, Vietnam, early 70s, and you didn't see films about that really until later with like The Deer Hunter, Apocalypse Now, First Blood, with exploitation, this kind of stuff. Anything that came out at that time, Maniac, Vice Squad, Vigilante, Repo Man, Taxi Driver, like all these classics. And I just have to put over Vigilante from 1983, Bill Lustig. If you've not seen that movie, it is fucking awesome. It's like one of the best Death Wish style exploitation movies I've ever seen. But yeah, that time period is just so unique. And I think it's something that, I think TJ, you said that through text, like they just don't make them like this anymore because I think there's so many bold choices back then that obviously wouldn't fly now, but things that just don't exist now, right? Like when you go to New York or LA now, it's still a dangerous place, but it's not this place. This place doesn't exist anymore. And I think it's kind of fascinating how our culture looks back on these time periods and what they are. But I think what lends, especially exploitation in this time period, to be something unique is that it's kind of foreign to a lot of people, right? Most people who watch movies, a lot of them who don't live in New York or LA at that time period, they couldn't identify with, Skid Row or, Manhattan or like what was happening. To them, these were odd concepts, right? So it was, injecting that humor and that weird element to it. It was kind of enjoyable just because it wasn't personal, right? But on the other end of that, I'm sure people that live there would see these things and they'd go, yeah, this is like, my backyard, right? This is kind of what I deal with every day. So it's kind of interesting how society perceives those things. Aside from that rant, I just, it's interesting to talk about exploitation because there's so much to it that, Hollywood ignores, and there's a lot of things you can learn from it. But yeah, the movie itself, I don't love it. I think it's a good film. I love John Deal as the killer. He was very creepy, drinking the egg, cutting the egg open.
Oh my God. If for nothing else, that scene alone made this a horror film, because that was a horrifying 2 minutes that I will never get back, with him sucking that egg. Ugh.
Dude, that was, and I guess that's supposed to represent, breastfeeding. Like he's looking at the picture of his mom, and it's like, that's where they're going. And the actors, Rory Calhoun is good. He's, of course, he's most known as Farmer Vincent from Motel Hell. And of course, a lot of older, like Western films. And the actor who played May was very good. I mean, he just really represented that role well and just was so entertaining. The other actors in the movie, they're young. So it's an exploitation film, right? So you kind of have to roll with it. Some of the acting is not great. There's a lot of like younger people who it's probably some of their earlier roles. So they're getting used to the camera and how it works. But yeah, I mean, it is an interesting movie. I don't know how many times I would watch it overall. I don't know how much I'm going to go back to this, but I think it's interesting, if nothing else, just for the story and getting to see what it was like in the early 80s and that time period, and the drug use that was going on, and unfortunately a lot of prostitution and a lot of things happening, and the serial killers. That's one thing too this movie touches, is serial killers. One thing I did want to bring up was in the mid 80s, it's very odd, is when they were filming Back to the Future, during the same period of Back to the Future, the Night Stalker was killing people. So if you actually look at the filming locations, it was like a week apart. He was killing people like 10 miles away from Back to the Future. So on one end, they're filming this movie that's so popular and happy. And on the other hand, this guy's like raining terror on California. And this movie it's interesting, right? This movie kind of brought up all these things that I thought about, and I did some research, and yeah, I think it's a period piece that it means something just for the content of what it is. Is it a perfect movie though? No. I think you can definitely pick it apart. I had to pause it a lot when I was watching it because I was doing a lot of different things. So I feel like I really need to do like a third watch of it to really pick it apart more. But I think overall I do enjoy the film. So yeah, I'll pass it along, see what you guys think.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed this, and probably for the wrong reasons. Y'all know that I love cheesy B movies, and that's exactly what this is. I mean, it has dark content. You have a high school girl that's resorted to being a prostitute to make ends meet, and if that's not bad enough, now she has to worry about this killer that's killing prostitutes. So you have her being a good student in a bad situation that just got even worse. There's almost until the end when she takes the gun, it's almost like it hasn't really set in for her. She's still kind of young and naive, even though she admits she slept with hundreds of men. So, there's still the innocence there that she has, that eventually goes away, as the killer gets closer to home. But when I was watching it, I was thinking, for such a dark theme, it feels like it was written by a 12-year-old, and not for bad reasons, for like the best reasons, because it's so cheesy in like the best possible cheesy ways in some of the scenes, and the dialogue is goofy at times. You have the cross-dresser who has the Benny Hill of fight scenes when he's fighting the killer, and they're going all over the furniture, and he's cracking one-liners the entire time. has the line earlier in the movie, "Remind me not to get murdered." Well, there was nobody there to remind him when it came his time. But I mean, you can almost hear that. I mean, it was just that fun, cheesy kind of scene, and that's what the whole movie is. I mean, it has its serious elements, it has its dark elements, but it also feels like it was trying to encapsulate not just the dark side, but the fun side of the 80s. You have some of those larger than life characters like the cowboy, the little Charlie Chaplin, the woman, the bleach blonde hair woman with the black eyebrows. The characters in this movie are so exaggerated, but that's what makes them fun. The killer at the end, he shaved his head, and then they have him running around New York looking like the last airbender, or like the Tibetan monk with his shaved head and his shawl on. One thing I did notice at the very end, when the cowboy saves the day and shoots the killer, it says Western on the dumpster in the alley beside where the body is. And I thought that, I don't know if that was intentional, if they just happened to shoot, the cowboy killing the guy and there just happened to be a dumpster there that said Western on it. But I thought that was just kind of a neat little thing. He was talking about being a gunslinger and all the people he had worked with, and then he kills this guy and there's just Western. Like John mentioned, the egg scene, that alone should qualify this as a horror film, because it was so hard to watch, and I kept waiting for it to end, and it felt like they were drawing it out on purpose. It was like, just when you thought it would be over, nope, he's still got a little bit of egg to suck. And it was like when a comedian does a joke and pushes it to the point where nobody's laughing, but then he keeps pushing it and eventually brings everybody back in. It was like that with this egg. It just kept going. But overall, I mean, the acting in certain situations, felt a little underwhelming. Some of it was a little almost forced, especially from Angel. There was, I guess when she was trying to be serious or sound more adult, it didn't really hit. But overall, I actually enjoyed it. It was an easy watch. That's one thing I always look for in movies that aren't considered the classics or aren't considered big budget or anything like that. Is with all the issues to the film aside, was it enjoyable? And this movie for me was enjoyable. I enjoyed the watch. So overall, yeah, I enjoyed the movie. And I want to say one line from the film, from the school counselor, that had me in the floor. And it's when she's talking to the tenant lady. And the line was, "One phone call downtown would put your ass in court so fast you wouldn't have time to wipe it, let alone pull your pants up." And I was wrong because this proper woman, and she just lays out, and the woman's like, "What a mouth on that, bro." She's been cussing every other word up to that point, and then this lady puts her in her place. But I just thought that was such a brilliant comeback, up there with some of my favorites in cinema and TV. So yeah, really enjoyable film, really enjoyed it. Travis?
Okay, so first I gotta start off with I can't really say anything because now the only thing stuck in my head is the Back to the Future Night Stalker thing. So thank you for that. Like, that's all I'm gonna think about now, because I mean, that's just fascinating. Like I said, I love like dwelling on stuff like that, and just, yeah, the idea that those two things were going on at the same time. I love kind of thinking about stuff like that, like when, yeah, stuff like that, like something so wholesome and fun is going on at the same time as something so like gruesome and wild. So yeah, kind of thank you for bringing that up, because it's just something to think about. So I'm gonna kind of just go through notes and just touch on them real quick. My big takeaway from this, so I love Angel. It's kind of why one of the reasons why I picked it, and it's actually a recent watch for me. So as you guys mentioned, the first time I watched this was during the Joe Bob special. I had never seen it. I've always seen like the VHS box. I've seen the poster before. It just never intrigued me. I think it was just because like it wasn't marketed as a horror film. It never really captivated me. I never really went out of my way to watch it. But I think during that, I think because it was the Halloween Hoedown, so I think the first movie was Terror Train, which I love Terror Train, so I stuck around and watched Angel, and yeah, I don't know, I loved Angel, and I rewatched it recently, and I think my biggest takeaway is, and it's just I almost feel like it's a weird version of Wizard of Oz. If Wizard of Oz was in on the Hollywood Boulevard, and Angel is like Dorothy but a hooker, because you have like these weird characters around her. Like you have this old West star, like all the characters you just listed off. Those are, that's the Lion, that's the Tin Man. Like the killer is the Wicked Witch. I don't know. Like it seems so surreal sometimes when Angel goes back to the streets, that like this is her surrounding, like these are the people she's around. And it's also too like, yeah, it's such a fun movie in a way, but also there's this bigger picture of, okay, here's this girl that's, you know, mid-teens, and she doesn't have any parents, she's living on her own, she's kind of forced to be a prostitute, uh, and her only kind of like family is this, essentially the streets. But meanwhile she's doing great in school and all this stuff. And it's just like, it really is like a sad story. And I don't think, you don't, as the audience, like you don't really realize like it's a sad story until like towards the end, when you just see her like slowly losing everything. She starts losing her friends, and then she gets exposed to the school as a prostitute. It's just like you see her downfall as it's happening, and then that's when you realize like, okay, like she doesn't have anything. So like it's just, there's definitely some really corny parts, and I could definitely see how this movie could be wrote off, or could be written off like when it came out. But I think sometimes, yeah, if you maybe look at the bigger picture, there are some like pretty heavy themes to this movie. And then my other big thing is, I just Kit Carson is, and this is like no exaggeration, is in my like top 10, 15 characters of, any movie. I just love that character because he's essentially playing himself in a way. With him being this, kind of like washed up Western star on the Hollywood Boulevard, doing tricks and stuff. And I just, to me, I think that's like really, it's really cool, but there's like this really like sadness to it. And I think it really shows. And I thought it was awesome that like Joe Bob touched on it in his episode. Is there's that moment in the diner when they're all sitting down, and he's listing off a couple of these actors, and he's talking about going to the rest home, the Hollywood home, and he's like, oh, I'll see this person, and Angel's like, I think he's dead, and he names off the other person, and Maeve's like, I think he's dead too. And he's like, it's really like, it's really a sad moment. It's just kind of like, all these actors from this era, like they're all dead. And, the only thing this guy has is pedaling on the streets. And I think that's true with like, I don't know, it's just true with like a lot of actors now. And it's just like the film industry and sports industry and like just any kind of entertainment industry. Like you get to a certain age and just you don't have a lot, and there's really not much you can do. And I think, to me, like when I was rewatching it recently, I'm kind of just thinking, I'm like, well, what do actors like that nowadays do? Because you have someone like Kit Carson, who he went to Hollywood Boulevard, and he would pedal himself and hand out 8x10s and whatever. Well, now I guess it would be conventions, which is more of like, I guess, a positive thing to do, is you get to meet your fans and all this stuff. So I guess that's what Kit Carson would probably be doing nowadays. So yeah, I love his character. I love all the character actors in this film. Susan Tyrell is awesome. She's really good in another Joe Bob featured The Baby. I had never seen that either, and watched that and thought it was amazing. Yeah, The Egg. I had that in my notes. The Egg it's insane. It's just, yeah, and I guess like the last couple of things is the big thing is you guys have both mentioned it is you're not going to be able to recapture that like era of Hollywood like ever again. Um just like I don't know, because like they mentioned like the Brown Derby, they mentioned Musso and Frank's, which is like the oldest restaurant in Hollywood. There's the TikTok is like seen in one of the last scenes. It's just like a lot of these places that just I don't know, it's just like classic Hollywood. It's run down, but it's still cool. I don't know. It's I guess like when I was growing up and like what I would see on TV and movies, it's what I envisioned Hollywood to be. And like, you go to LA and it's it's really not what you expect, and you do get let down, but it's what like when I see a movie like Angel and I see that, it just gets me really excited. I'm like, oh, yeah, like Hollywood's awesome. So I think that's why I love Angel so much. And yeah, like as far as like recommendations, I mean, I can't recommend this movie enough. And I think for first time viewers, I highly recommend checking out the Joe Bob Briggs version just because, I you get really cool facts, obviously, but I think too, this is a movie like it does need those breaks. Like you do need those like, kind of like the commercial breaks where it does break it up into pieces and because it does like you do need some breaks in between even though it's a quick watch. I think those breaks are kind of needed sometimes, so definitely check it out.
Cool. Yeah. So this was my first time watching it. I had seen the VHS cover, maybe posters for years, but what wasn't really my type of movie typically. And probably there's only a handful of movies that I would actually myself label as exploitation that I actually really come back to. So I didn't really know what to expect from this. I was expecting it to be probably a little harder than it actually is, because when I think, prostitute exploitation, serial killer, I think of a much harder edge to it than I think, which this film does. It rides a lot of lines. It dances with that, but I wouldn't say that it mostly is that. I love what Travis said about it being like a weird, messed up kind of version of like the Wizard of Oz. But it's almost like with the relationships, like Angel is more at home on the streets now than she is in her real life, even though she doesn't want to be on the streets. So she's kind of caught between two identities and two worlds, and both those worlds are kind of like crumbling in on each other on the backdrop of this serial killer killing all of her friends is kind of that driving force that forces her to kind of combine the two worlds. And it's a very interesting, I think the way I would describe it is it's John Waters meets John Hughes. And what would you get when you put those two elements together, which are just is an insane combination to try and make. But I mean, I think it's probably the best way I know how to describe it, because as dark as the material is, like this girl's talking about being on the streets, hooking since she was 12 and sleeping with hundreds of men. That's terrible. Like that's hard exploitation, except the way that you treat the subject matter is lighthearted, and all of the, the prostitutes and the crossdresser and all those people, and the cowboy, the former, probably stunt man, Hollywood guy. All these people should not be the loving, warm kind of caricatures almost that they end up being, and replacing her family. And actually, I would argue that this film makes the streets seem really fun and cool, but makes reality in high school seem like the hell. Which in 1984, when this come out, that's like a year before The Breakfast Club. That's And it's right there when everything's starting to be very saccharine. You know, the 80s comedies, the Who's the Boss of it all the things, you know, we have this, and I almost feel like the acting and especially from Angel, the acting and the presentation of how like the regular world is kind of presented is almost kind of in that world up until you get all the people bullying her and everything that really kind of takes it over the top at some points. But yeah, I mean, the crime exploitation, I think that Jay said is probably the closest way I would categorize this. I actually liked the movie. I didn't expect to like the movie. The synopsis of the movie isn't typically the type of movie I typically enjoy, but you know, this isn't like 70s grindhouse exploitation. This is like, it takes the themes of those and then it puts it in a little more digestible package. Now, John Deal, the killer in this film, excellent job. And I've seen him, he's still crops up, great character actor, crops up as creepy as hell. And most of the things he does, just because he's got that face with the, you know, the pock marks and everything, that just, he was born to be a creepy character actor, and he does his job well. He knows the assignment. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised, I think, by this film, because I was like, it was honestly a slog. I thought it was going to be a slog. I was putting off watching it. And then I was like, well, when am I going to watch I don't want to watch the prostitute exploitation film with my wife around or my daughter around. So when am I going to watch that film? So I find the time to watch it. And then I was like, this isn't at all what I thought it was going to be. I can see why it would make Joe Bob. It's got enough of the serial killer kind of intrigue and that kind of gritty 80s thing that John was talking about, that kind of puts it in a world that, for those of us, I was born in 1984. This movie come out the year I was born. So I've only seen or heard of the mythology of like LA and New York and that time period and the grittiness in films, you know. So to get a different kind of take on it is interesting. And it is that thing that only exists in celluloid now, because LA will probably never, you know, be that version of LA again, just like New York will never be that version of New York. Even though the first time I went to New York, first thing I saw was a hobo peeing on the street. So there's you still got your corners.
Well, you see that in downtown Nashville.
That's also true. Actually, I saw that 2 miles from my house off of Bell Road. So, but yeah, Jay, what do you think about it?
So we all kind of picked up on the same stuff. I've watched it twice now, both with Joe Bob, and I do, like Travis said, I highly suggest checking out with him, because you do learn a lot. Like, I'm pretty sure he said that the egg scene, the actor just came into the audition, did that, and they're like, you got the job. Like, they wanted something creepy. That's what he led with, and they're like, sold, sign me up. That alone, like you said, Kellen, makes it a horror film. That's something I didn't remember from my first screening. But after watching it again today, I'm worried it's going to be in my head a lot. And it's not even so much just the sucking the egg, but then he like just looks at that photo, and it's very unsettling. The most unsettling thing in the film, obviously.
It reminded me of Homelander with the milk.
Yeah.
In The Boys.
Absolutely. I like, Travis, what you said about the Wizard of Oz. I can totally see that. And if I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure she had ruby red slippers on the first time we see her in that mini skirt, kind of like going through the town.
I feel like she did.
Yeah, I think that was intentional. When I take a step back and think about that, for sure. Also, like what you said about Kit, that was a very emotional scene. Like, he's sitting there and realizing everybody around him's dead. It's something my dad likes to say to me frequently. He's like, well, you know, there's only so many of us left in my graduating class. He reminds me of that constantly, and that's a feeling I have never had, and I don't understand yet. And that was very emotional. You connect with him. I loved his character. If they ever remake it, Sam Elliott would be perfect. Like, could you imagine Sam Elliott in that role? Like, sign me up for that. Dick Shawn was also great.
Oh.
Was his acting perfect? No, but he was so funny, and they let him ad lib so much stuff, which just made it that much better because ad libbing always adds to the scene. I think Joe Bob said they had to do several takes and he could never remember what he said, so it was like a different line every time. So that's great. I liked it the first time I saw it. I think I liked it a little bit more this time. I need to watch it by itself. That's the takeaway. Because when you watch anything with Joe Bob, you're going to like it. You know, even he makes things seem interesting. You know, like we still want to watch it because he's talking about it. Besides Cannibal Holocaust, that one can go to hell. But I need to get away from Joe Bob and see it by itself and see how I truly feel. But I think watching it the second time definitely my rating definitely improved a little bit. So we'll go around and give our rankings. I think I gave it a 3 originally, so I'm going to go with 3.5 this time around. It's a lot of fun. John, you said it's not really something you could rewatch. It might not be something you want to rewatch, but I think it's something you can. Like if it's on TV and there's nothing else, you know, you're not doing anything else, I'm like, oh, this is, you know, I enjoy this. So I'm going to stick with a 3.5. Kellen?
Yeah, I thought about it when Travis was talking, and I just wanted to point it out. I thought it was funny, the scene with the cop when he's talking to all the prostitutes, and instead of telling them to stay home, instead of telling them to get off the street, he's like, all right, prostitutes, there's a killer out, so buddy up. When you're going to give those BJs, make sure you bring a friend.
Is that like a gaggle of prostitutes? What is the term for a group of prostitutes?
Is that an innuendo? A gaggle of prostitutes?
Well, it is now.
But yeah, it's an enjoyable film, and I do agree with Jay. It's one of those that, you know, if you're just sitting at home, nothing really to watch, flipping through the channels, and you see this, you're definitely probably going to stop on it. Just, you know, because it is an enjoyable film. You know, it's not one that I would probably like just think of and be like, oh, I need to go watch Angel. But like Jay said, if you're just flipping through the channels and it's on, you're probably going to stop and just, you know, see some of the characters, some of the story, because it is an enjoyable film. So as far as ratings go, I think I would probably give it a 2.5.
Something it did for me too is it made me want to go back and watch other films that are like similar genre wise or even look the same. Like the first thing when we were talking about it over text, I'm like, you should watch Savage Streets. Like that's what it made me think of, which is another film I love. So that goes to it too. Like if you can watch a movie and it makes you want to watch 10 other movies, you know, it's done a job there. All right, John, what'd you give it?
Yeah, Savage Streets is a great one. I did want to say, because I don't know if I'm gonna be able to ever bring this actress up again on the show because it's such a random actress, but Susan Terrell is Sally. She's in a really creepy, odd movie called Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker.
Yep.
Yes.
It's so strange in that movie. When I watched that movie the first time, what I kept thinking was, you know, if they ever had done Psycho in the 80s before 4, she would have been perfect as Norma Bates. Like, I just feel like she just has that vibe of like, you know, Mrs. Bates in Psycho. But yeah, I mean, I do like the film. The first time, I think with Joe Bob, I liked it more. The second time, I'm like you, TJ. It's like, or UJ. It's like, you know, it reminded me of other movies, and I was thinking about like Vice Squad because it's also a movie from this director. But yeah, I would say overall, like probably a 3 out of 5 is fair. I'd watch it again, but just not a lot.
Yeah. All right, Travis, what did you give it?
So I think like when I watched it with the Joe Bob version, you know, like you guys said, you watch anything he puts on, you're gonna like it more. I mean, yeah, because there's stuff that like I think, and I want to put him over real quick because there's so many movies. Like I struggle with watching movies. It's like literally the hardest thing. It's like it's my livelihood, but it's the hardest thing to sit down and do. And when the only time I like watch a movie is a Joe Bob movie, so you know, respect to him because if he can get me to sit down and watch a movie, you know, I love that about him. He's just it's just such a good program, and he's just so brilliant, and I just, you know, I love everything that he does and love the programming that he puts out, and it's just fantastic. So yeah, no, I think when I first watched it, 3.5. After the second watch, only because my appreciation for Rory Calhoun's acting, I'm gonna bump it up to a 4. And then just same thing as you guys, it just made me want to revisit more films from that era. And it also reminds me of like almost like an American Graffiti, just with like, just how like people travel along in their cars and just stuff like that. So it because it almost has that like teen comedy feel too. So yeah, like it is to me, it's like if American Graffiti did a double feature with Vice Squad, because yeah, you guys mentioned Vice Squad, and it's like that's as soon as we end this, that's I either want to watch Vice Squad or Motel Hell immediately after this call. So it's going to be one or the other.
Nice. I love Vice Squad too, for sure. All right, TJ.
Oh, Motel Hell is a 80s classic too. Let's not
Yeah.
let's not tarnish the good name of that. But yes, I'm kind of torn between 3.5 out of 5. I think I'm gonna go with 3 out of 5, but there's definitely room to grow with rewatches, and I could see myself rewatching this. There's some films I watch and I'm like, I'll never see that again, but I could see rewatching this again. So that's 3 out of 5.
Nice. That puts it at a 3.2. So we'll call that a 3 out of 5. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to wherever you are listening to this podcast now, and follow us over on Instagram. Travis, thank you so much for joining us. It was great. You want to take a second, tell people where they can find your films, anything else you got going on?
You got it. Yeah. So first movie, Cyst, is available Amazon, Voodoo. It's in stores at some Walmarts. You can get it online at Target. You can get it on Amazon Prime. Pretty much anywhere that's streaming, with the exception of things like Tubi, Netflix, stuff like that. My other film, Christmas Tapes, same thing. It's available on Amazon. It is available on Tubi. We got Infrared, Miracle Valley. Honestly, the easiest way to look up my movies, if you search my name, all my movies come up. So Travis, Ayers. Just Google it, and all of them come up. If, like I said, I was talking to you guys earlier. My favorite movie I've done yet is Cyst. We had, it was just a really fun movie. See it with a group of people. That's the way we made it. It's made to be a midnight movie. Get with a group of friends, shut off your mind, and then just have fun. We made a movie about a cyst monster going crazy. Like it's not meant to be taken seriously. It's meant to have, it's meant to be watched and have fun, have a good time. So yep, everything is streaming. Like I said, some things are available on DVD in stores. Some of those movies are available on VHS through Tapes from the Crypt and Retro VHS World. So there are some physical media out there. And then coming soon, probably next year, Forbidden Sky, a new UFO movie. So kind of nice mix of, we're kind of calling it, it's like if Fire in the Sky met an Art Bell episode. So
wow.
kind of going something for that. It's going to be, kind of the Christmas Tapes cruise. So myself, Rob Livings, Randy Nunlau, and Greg Sestero kind of doing our own little thing. But yeah, it's about a guy that used to have a successful career in a alien themed television show. So like kind of like My Favorite Martian type show, and it got canceled, and now he's kind of doing his own Art Bell show, trying to basically doing a Rory Calhoun type character. He's trying to keep his name alive. No one really cares about him. No one wants to hear it. Well, one day he gets a call from, some other life form, and they basically say, they want to see him, and it kind of goes from there. So yeah, that's the way we've been referring it. It's, Fire in the Sky meets Art Bell meets Communion. So that's what we're kind of like summing it up as. But yeah, I would say we're probably going to start filming that. I want to say next spring. So other than that, everything should be available for streaming. And yeah, watch Angel. It's a fun movie.
So go check all that out. I've seen Infrared. I enjoyed that one. Of course, I love Cyst. Is there a plan for a Blu-ray ever on Cyst?
So there, what's unfortunate about that is there is, Cyst is available on Blu-ray in Germany. I had to order it. So this is the fun part about the movie business. I had to order my own movie on Blu-ray on eBay, because there's a steelbook version of the movie on Blu-ray, and it was only released in Germany. So I had to order myself a copy on eBay. So yeah, for some reason it was just a distribution thing. It was only released there, but I would say within the next year or so, our distributor RLJ, they're going to try and get a special edition release put out there. I assume it will come after. So we're still available for purchase on Amazon. So probably once we go free for Prime users, we'll probably get a Blu-ray release after that. So it's coming. I just don't know when. So right now, the only official Blu-ray release of Cyst is in Germany. So they pop up on eBay.
Yeah, there's one I'm looking right now. Actually, there's a few that she was once $20 right now.
Yeah, I think that's what I ended up paying. And it was funny. Like I feel like I might have I think it was more. So I think it was like 35 or 40, and it might have been, I don't know, like the conversion rate was weird. Like I think it might have been more than that. And I was like, hey, like I literally sweet talked the guys like, hey, I'm like one of the producers of this movie, and I would really love to have this because it's this nice steel book with like this like picture book in there and just gorgeous. I'm like, I would love to have this. Like I really need to have this. And he got back to me. He was like, wow, you really are one of the producers of this. He's like, oh my God. He's like, I would love to do this. And he ended up taking like $20 off the final price. And I'm just like, it's just like, I don't know. It's just such a fascinating industry, but I love it. I couldn't ask for more of it. So yeah.
Well, now I'm going to have to keep an eye out. I love steelbooks. That's my soft spot. And now there's a Cyst steelbook. It will have to be mine, but there's not one on eBay right now. So
no, and they occasionally pop up, but yeah, set like a reminder or whatever, because they occasionally pop up. So definitely be on the lookout for one.
Awesome. All right. So go check out all his films wherever you can find them. Follow him on Instagram to keep up with him. And us
yes.
too. So as always, I'm Jay with John, Kellen, TJ, and Travis. And until next time,
keep it spooky.